listen to it. So, another wonderful moment of. No, I don't want to do the now we are free thing. I want to do the other one. The victory theme. The victory theme. So, Gladiator's a pretty good Roman movie. So, Spartacus by the director Stanley Kubrick was brought. There's large sections of America that have almost no Wi-Fi. It's amazing of all the things that people talk about, like economic assistance, and we have like a lot of America's like third world when it comes to technology. It's because the people that really run this country really don't give a fuck. And that's the theme tonight, folks. The reason Rome fell apart wasn't because of the barbarians. If you don't believe me, you can go listen to the last section of this book that I did. I called it Rome at Home. That's a line from this book. I'll probably steal some other line from this. Can we please play the Gladiator soundtrack? We may not be playing the Gladiator soundtrack. No, but the theme is the Roman oligarchs. Let's call them oligarchs. The Roman oligarchs were so greedy that the Romans abandoned them. And then as things got, think of all the headlines today. Monday morning, you wake up, the guy from Old Miss is going to LSU for $100 million, take the whole team, his whole coaching team with him. I'm just trying to tie this all together. Like, the basic structures of America are breaking up because the oligarchy is so fucking greedy. They won't even stay and the basic structures of America are breaking up because the oligarchy is so fucking greedy. They won't even stay and I'm going to athletic director from Old Miss team. Saban left CW. Greed. That's the theme tonight, folks. Destroyed the Roman Empire. It's not the barbarians. The barbarians, I got an A in my Roman history class at Yale because I argued that when Caesar beat the Gauls, I think it's a volcano or something. It's like the core of a volcano. And Vercingetorix, or whatever his name was like up on this thing. It's like the core of a volcano. And Vercingetorix, or whatever his name was like up on this thing, and then Caesar was surrounding him, and then Caesar got surrounded by more Gauls, and this big famous battle and so forth. At the high water mark of that, and then Caesar got surrounded by more Gauls, and this big famous battle and so forth. At the high water mark of that battle, Caesar used German mercenaries to the oligarchy. It's the oligarchy. It's destroying the Pittsburgh Steelers. Most people don't know this. The Pittsburgh Steelers aren't really owned by the Rooney family anymore. Anthony Brown, who I think is the great, I know everybody hates him, but I don't. I think he's the great Pittsburgh Steeler. He left. His relationship with the Steelers broke down, and that happened. He said, "Yeah, Mr. Rooney isn't with us anymore." Everything that you see in America that's breaking down is because of greed. And the other reason is because we don't really have that much anymore. All this stuff 10 years ahead of China and 25 years ahead, we don't really have that much anymore. All this stuff 10 years ahead of China and 25 years ahead of Russia, that's all psychobabble. That's all just very Roman history, people. So, there we go. So this next chunk is called Violence in Society in the 5th Century. It's actually more exciting with the background music. The Crisis of the West. Violence in Society in the 5th Century. And then New Romans from Old. So if you like this kind of thing, you can listen to me read. It's not very. It's about 8 pages. Then I'll probably stop and digress and relate this to the things that are going on. Along with the lines of the greed is, late imperial delusion. Last week it was announced that delusion. Last week it was announced that the new Google AI product that's generally called Google Gemini 3 or something like that, GPUs, which are gaming chips. Google has been building their own chips. They're called TPUs. NVIDIA's chips are almost obsolete. Seriously, they're almost obsolete. The best agentic AI right now is probably Manus. That's a Chinese thing. There's actually they're trying to put through legislation to keep out the Chinese. Like, we can't buy Chinese cars. You understand that? Because if we did, our car companies would be instantly bankrupt. Okay? They're trying to put, like they did with TikTok, right? They had, well, we can't have Americans, Mitch McConnell said we can't have China in control of TikTok, so we have to sell it to somebody. So they're trying to use, like, the tariff bullshit, national security, to say we're not allowed to use Chinese AI systems, all of which are open source. Americans aren't open source. We don't know who runs OpenAI. We don't even know what OpenAI is. So imperial delusion is the theme tonight. Just to do the math, let's just say NVIDIA's chips aren't all they're cracked up to be. If the stock went down 90%, it would be as big as Exxon. If it went down 95%, it would be as big as Intel. 95%. Am I saying it's going to go down 95%? No, I have no idea what it's going to do. I don't think we have functioning capital markets anymore, because like this statue behind me, this is Constantine the Great. He's the guy that made the Roman Empire Christian. This head of this thing was like this gargantuan thing, like as big as a house. And that's what we're in. We're sort of in like the America's into gigantism, because it doesn't really have anything anymore. So it just keeps making out these bullshit giant numbers and giant valuations, and Donald Trump walking around the Oval Office talking about $22 trillion that's not there. And my theme to you is, if you really listen to all the people on CNBC and Chamath Palihapitiya and Andre, they don't have anything. What do they have? They have like apps and shit. They don't really have any like core thing. Just like in the late Roman Empire, they didn't have the muscle anymore, right? All the rural Italic, I want to say, farmers had been swept off the land and replaced by slaves. Yeoman farmers who own their own land, and they blow the horn or whatever they did. Everybody has to come in and like join the army. They're all can like work for 16 hours a day, and you just put a fucking shield on them and some armor and hand them a sword, and they're ready to go. When you got nothing but slaves, you got nothing but slaves. They don't give a shit. I mean, there's a reason why What's Your Roman Empire is such a popular thing. So you're going to have to listen to me read for the next 20 minutes, because I wanted to read this anyway, so I might as well read it out loud. Violence in Society in the 5th Century. What was it like to be a local Roman at this time? It is important to redress the anti-barbarian bias of our text by emphasizing the Roman side of the equation. The violence of Romans to each other and the zest with which the Roman regional elites of the former imperial West collaborated with barbarian warlords to create for themselves new centers of government. But this process did not bring peace. The creation of rival courts around rival leaders led to a state of unresolved political instability in Gaul, France, and Spain. A climate of violence spread across Gaul and Spain in the course of the 5th century. Now, if you know from your catechism, Augustine wrote the book The City of God, and he talked about the sack of Rome in the 5th century. This book's point is the sack of Rome really wasn't that big of a deal. It was all of this stuff that we're talking about right now. All right, I'll just read and shut up. This climate of violence, rather than any notable slaughter or the sack of any large cities, was what was slowly but surely changed the face of Roman society. The last true barbarian invasion happened in 451 when the armies of Attila the Hun entered Gaul, only to be defeated in the major battle of the Catalonian fields by Count Aetius, who led an alliance of Roman and Visigoth armies against the Huns. After the last great war, Gallic society was left to grind itself into a new shape in what French historian Fernand Braudel, speaking of a similar phenomenon, the rise of piracy in the early modern Mediterranean, he called the Age of Undeclared Wars. How had this situation come about, and what were its effects? In negotiating undeclared wars. How had this situation come about, and what were its effects? In negotiating, I would suggest if you look at the financial condition of America, all these private equity firms are sort of like pirates. They don't produce anything. They just run around and raid everything. In negotiating with barbarians in the early decades of the 5th century, Romans flattered themselves that the barbarians could be treated as farmers. They could be quieted with gifts. This calculation ignored many factors. Young warriors liked to fight. Kings needed to fight so as to maintain their prestige against competing brothers and aristocrats. All needed the wealth that came from war. And this wealth was the goal of most of these wars was not extensive conquest. The Visigoths of Aquitaine, about whom we know most, regularly went on campaign for strictly limited aims, to assert control of a neighboring region here, or to shake down or to occupy a single city there. For this reason, the Visigoth campaigns like those of here, or to shake down or to occupy a single city there. For this reason, the Visigoth campaigns like those of or the Swiss, who had established themselves in northwestern Spain, were largely wars of nerves. A campaign up to the walls of a city would end with the systemic pillage of the rich countryside around it. This was how the Visigoths set to work outside Bezos, the former hometown of Ausonius. The enemies ravaged the villages or villas all around. They set fire to farm buildings. They ruined vineyards and grain fields by driving livestock into them. This carefully administered violence to the land was calculated to cause the inhabitants of a region or of a city to reconsider their loyalties. They would open their gates or would offer to buy off the invaders. There was usually a fraction within a city that favored such a course. In 453, a church council in Angers laid down that a cleric who had played a role in betraying the city to the enemy was to be not only excommunicated but barred from public banquets. This was the ultimate ostracism, imposed by a little community in a time of little wars. But it also showed that there was always people ready to collaborate with barbarians for the sake of peace and quiet. Wealth came from plunder and, above all, from a lively slave trade. The terrible scenes Augustine had portrayed in Africa in the late 420s became normal in Gaul and Spain in the latter 5th century. Not all captives ended up slaves in distant lands. Rather, the culmination of a successful little war consisted in selling back to a pillaged region its own inhabitants. As a result, the Christian pious act of ransoming captives came, in Gaul, to be more than a gesture of sending contributions to a distant frontier, as had been in the case in the 4th century. It became an intensely local matter. In today's days, it's like cartels holding people for ransom. It involved the healing of the social fabric of the entire war-torn region through the return of its workforce. Christian charity ensured that farmers and slaves were brought back to their former masters. Looking down from northern Britain, Patricius, now St. Patrick, who had already served his time as a slave in Ireland, saw Gaul as a land of ransoms. It is the custom of the Roman Gallic Christians to send suitable holy persons to the Franks and to other tribes with so many thousands of solidity, it's a coin, so as to ransom baptized Christian captives. It was through ransoms rather than through any other pious actions that the wealth of the wealthy was deployed in the churches in the time of the brutal little wars. For ransoms implied liquidity. Large sums of cash or bullion had to be made immediately available in a way that was beyond the means of more modest members of the local congregations. Hence the praise of the Lady Eugenia on her sarcophagus at Marseilles. With her wealth, she freed captives from the chains imposed by violence and brought those back away from their lands. One suspects that it was the spoils of little wars and money raised from ransoms that account for the fact that the Visigothic territories along the Garonne Valley from Toulouse to Bordeaux remained an oasis of prosperity. It is only in this region that villas appear to have survived. They were paved no longer with haunting scenes of pagan mythology, but with exuberant designs of flowers and vegetations. These patterns were well within the powers of the local craftsmen, who reproduced them with unusual zest. The Aquitanian sarcophagi, though notoriously difficult to date, may well have come from this period. That's some famous thing. Carved in stone from local quarries, they signaled the emergence of a distinctive local form of prestige goods. They were adapted to family mausolea and to displays of upper-class burial around the tomb of saints. They no longer look... Oh, by the way, today the Roman Catholic and Orthodox clergy are meeting at Nicaea. It's actually a really big deal. We'll get to that later. It was an art of local Romans for local Rome. They may serve as a reminder that a province such as Spain could be both prosperous and already, quote, post-Roman, under barbarian management. At the same time, the Christianity of Gaul changed its texture as a response to the new levels of instability. It is not as surprising as it seems that the age of the barbarian invasions of Gaul coincided with a golden age of church building. As we will see in the subsequent chapter, these new cathedrals were directly linked to the need to maintain the morale of the inhabitants of the cities in a world where they were often called upon to withhold. Cathedrals were directly linked to the need to maintain the morale of the inhabitants of the cities in a world where they were often called upon to withhold sieges. Within these cathedrals, Christian preaching came to emphasize above all the value of cohesion. It was pride and envy, not wealth, that was most abhorrent to Gallic preachers of this period. There was good reason for the emphasis on the two vices. In the unstable conditions of Gaul, pride and envy translated only too readily into factionalism. And factionalism, as we have seen, was what exposed Romans to each other as much as it exposed them to the barbarians. Let us take the example of a set of anonymous sermons known as a sermon collection of Eusebius Gallicanus, which we have already studied in detail by Lisa Bailey. They were preached in the Rhone Valley at the end of the 5th century. It is no coincidence that they should have emphasized a need for solidarity among ordinary Christians that was as exacting as any imposed on monks. The inhabitants of the little cities faced the prospect of siege, were as cramped and as dependent upon each other as were the monks of any monastery. One preacher of the mid-5th century, Valenius of Chimaeze, a hill town perched above the Roman road near Nice, went out of his way to control even sarcasm and witticisms among his flock. It was unwise to make jokes about the physical traits of one's fellow citizens, to call a man of swarthy complexion Mr. Silvershine, or an elder compatriot Baba, like a baby. Revenge for such a slight may take the form of treason. Looking back from a later time, the inhabitants of Trier believed that the city had once been betrayed to barbarians and sacked because of the anger of the leading citizen who had been provoked by a coarse joke at the expense of his wife. This is interesting. Christian sources provide vivid and uniformly self-congratulatory evidence for the role of the church in maintaining the morale of the cities of Gaul in this time. Christian hagiography presents us with images of heroic bishops standing on their walls of the cities and of great Christian basilicas filled with refugees in search of sanctuary. We have those today too. But these incidents were exaggerated in retrospect. There was only so much that the Christian churches could do. Lay persons, and especially the wealthy who owned the properties outside the cities, had to fend for themselves. Many did this none too badly. But it's harder to find this. Only by using archaeology as well as written sources can we reconstruct something of what was happening. In the first place, the landowners had to act quickly if they were to preserve their properties. They had to become more resolutely local than they had been in the 4th century. What was needed now were not large incomes gathered from many regions, but power on the spot. What a great sentence. That's the whole theme here, people. What was needed now were not large incomes gathered from many regions of the Roman economic system, but power on the spot, like we think of in the European tradition of like castles, and the whole feudal thing happened under the Romans. The great age of absentee land ownership ended. Paulinus of Pella simply gave up all hope of gaining revenues from his mother's estates in distant Greece. Quote, "For there were extensive farms, well stocked with numerous peasants, scattered but not too widely separated, which even for a prodigal or careless lord may have provided an abundant income." Rome at home, everything became local. Paulinus's failure to draw on these distant lands marked the beginning of the decline into poverty. As a contemporary writer in Provence observed, quote, "Men rendered conspicuous by official honors, placed at the top of the empire by occupying high posts with revenues drawn from everywhere and properties that stretched throughout the Roman world, now appear to us figures in a fairy tale." That's going to happen in the United States of America. That's going to happen here. The world of the super rich, associated with persons such as Petronius Probus, had well and truly passed. I mean, Trump is sort of like this playboy guy of the last 50 years, right? And his shit's going down. But we must remember that in Gaul and Spain there had been few such persons even at the height of the Age of Gold. As we saw, the rural landscape of these provinces had not been dominated by the vast estates of absentee landowners, or even by the latifundia, plantation owners, owned by local figures. It was largely owned by competing petty noblemen, whose villas clustered around the towns. They were comfortable but not outstandingly wealthy. Modern archaeological surveys have enabled us to measure the horizons of the possible for such persons. To take one example, careful excavations of the rubbish tip of Quinta de Longus in Lusitania, now Elvas, in southeastern Portugal, have shown that it was possible to have an elegant, even beautiful villa, yet to eat. Have shown that it was possible to have an elegant, even beautiful villa, yet to eat on dishes produced by regional potteries. In the 4th century, the owners of villas such as King Zelongus were representative of the local elites. There were the little big men who we met in Chapter 1. We have attempted to glimpse their features, alas, not always successful given the taste of our evidence, the state of our evidence, beneath the air of publicity generated by the Christian members of the super rich, such as Paulinus and the two Melanius, not to be confused with the first lady. For such petty noblemen, the 5th century was not necessarily an age of catastrophe. It opened up new opportunities for them. In many regions, they found themselves no longer overshadowed by Roman grandees connected with the empire-wide system. Service at the barbarian court gave them a degree of local power they had not enjoyed previously to such an extent. The 5th century was the age of the little big man. But I would just say this is how like the Roman world became what we think of as European. But this process happened at a cost to both the standard of living and, to a certain degree, their Romanness. It is remarkable how quickly the villas built on or rebuilt in the 4th century disappear from the archaeological record in the course of the 5th century. But as we have seen in many regions, villas had shown most clearly the footprint of wealth in the countryside. With the end of the villas, it is as if the wealth of an entire class had vanished from our radar screen, like the Civil War. Although it may have been accumulated with more difficulty and on less massive scale, wealth had not vanished, but it had lost its clearly recognizable Roman face. No one attempted to shine the 5th century Gaul in Spain through building a villa. Service at the barbarian court, the maintenance of a townhouse in cities such as Merida, Toulouse, and Bordeaux, and a reliable retinue were what was needed. With this went a slow but sure change of lifestyle. In a less secure age, skills developed in hunting changed easily into skills of cavalry warfare. Armed retinues, both for self-protection and to assert equality with barbarian kings and their army, cost local Romans as much as mosaics and private bathhouses had once done. Right? We're starting to make knights. Everybody needs knights. In many regions distant from the centers of powers of prestige, full-blown burial now seems to have replaced the villa as the way in which wealth was put on a show. Both in northern Greece and in the Douro Valley, burials with grave goods, which scholars had once associated only with German barbarians, have been shown to be the work of Romans. On one such occasion, the members of a local elite were put on display throughout the funeral. They lay on their biers adorned with status symbols that still carried echoes of an earlier, more affluent age: military brooches and buckles in northern Gaul, hunting equipment and horse harnesses in Spain. The dominus might still wish to be seen as a great hunter, but this dominance was no longer expressed through great mosaics or sarcophagi, which had shown him as a mythological lord of the hunt of the 4th century Spain, in southern Gaul and in southern Britain. A graveside ceremony was enough. The rest of the income of the local big man may have been spent on warfare or on building up supporters through gifts and feasting. It's kings and knights and food and horses, and we're on our way to like the Middle Ages. Although we now face a world where it is harder to distinguish rich from poor in the archaeological record. For in many regions of the West, the rich had lost their strident attributes of wealth that had rendered them so gloriously visible in the 4th century. Those who wished to remain rich knew that their first priority had not changed since imperial times. They had to control their labor force. This had always been difficult in times of violence. We can only guess at the scenarios of retrenchment and control that were adopted. Recent archaeological surveys have offered scattered hints of what may happen on the ground. The regions outside Braziers, for instance, showed a marked fall-off of dispersed settlements and the emergence of a few large conglomerations in the course of the 5th century. Some landowners went so far as to offer fortifications to their peasantry. Dardanus, the former prefect of Gaul, opened up the road to the upland valleys east of Cisteron in the Alps. He and his brother left a public inscription beside Cisteron in the Alps. He and his brother left a public inscription beside the road to proclaim their feat. The model village, as we saw in the last chapter, was even called Theopolis, the city of God. Dardanus had placed it under the protection of God. They furnished walls and gates, which, established on their own estate, they wished to serve as a common refuge for all. So we get castles, like we think of European castles. A ruthless and unpopular servant of the Roman state, Dardanus had every reason to wish to feel safe. But the language of the inscriptions make plain that this was no private castle in the making. Dardanus' fortification of Theopolis was presented as an act of loyalty to the empire. The walls had been put up for the public good. In doing this, Dardanus urged a language of public building, which up until then had been more common in the forum of a city. Now Dardanus was prepared to set up a grand inscription that advertised his care for mere villagers. Dardanus knew that if he had not provided fortifications, the inhabitants of a rich upland valley may have scattered further into the hills. Their labor would have become lost to him and his heirs within a generation. A recent survey in Spain enables us to trace this danger as it emerged on the ground. The survey studied the plains of Jarama and the plateau land between Toledo and Madrid. There's no evidence of depopulation or destruction in the area. Rather, what we see is what we, in the long term, would have spelled the ruin of a landowner of late Roman style, a population that had once been held in place through a network of villas, which in turn had linked them to a city and its tax collectors, slowly but surely scattered into informal groupings of low-profile farms and villages. The villages remained stratified. These were no happy communes of equals freed from the burden of rents and taxes, but the old mechanisms of extracting these rents and taxes had unraveled. Once the farms and villages had broken loose from the tight net spread of the villa, it was next to impossible to extract from the high level of wealth that had supported the affluent residences of the 4th century age of gold. Okay, which is a nice place to stop. We only have a couple pages here. Actually, I might just stop for the night and answer some questions but the old mechanisms of extracting these rents and taxes had unraveled. Okay, let's all calm down a little bit. So, folks, what's going to happen is the financial class, the oligarchs, truly the oligarchs with a capital O, not the rich people around you that maybe go to the country club. We're not talking about that. We're talking about these people that control tens and even tens of billions of dollars, okay? They're going to go away in America. How do you know? Because there's this new thing out called history. And the reason, look at this woman from Nashville, okay? Afton Bain. What a fucking great name. It's like a Faulkner novel. Afton Bain. What is she running on? Global warming? No. Chicks with dicks? No. LGBTQ bullshit? No. Ms. Bain is running on, let me see if I can find this exactly. We have third world Wi-Fi tonight. Afton Bain is running on like groceries, roads, and like feed the kids. Afton Bain is right out of that book. Okay? The dick that's running against her, the Republican that's running against her. Yeah, here she is. By the way, she's pretty good looking too. She looks like the... Here. Here's my screensaver. She looks like that. So I've used that screensaver. That's Jessica Lange from a movie adaptation of Titus Andronicus, a Shakespeare play. And I saw that, I was looking for something like the Queen of the Goths or some bullshit, that I do in my content here. That's sort of like, what's your Roman Empire and blah, blah, blah. And so I went and watched that movie, and then I fucking love Jessica Lange. So I found this picture, and I was like, this is perfect. This is like, so then I did the thing a couple weeks ago called Sex and Conspiracy when the Epstein thing was coming out. So my picture for sexuality and conspiracy and sort of political problems is right here. Okay? Well, you got to have fun with this, people. Everybody has to have a little fun. You know what I mean? So look at her. Let me not use this picture. If you cornrowed her hair, she would look just like Jessica Lange. So, but what I'm getting at is the Republican Party is now like the Roman oligarchy, like locking themselves up in their villas and saying, would you please tell all the fucking poor people to go away? And what replaced that in a Roman context was the barbarians at the gate, and internally the rich people and the Catholic Church were like, we have to hold the city together or we're all going to die. So this whole new vibe of how rich and poor and religion and castles and all that like grew out of this. And the point is, this isn't something after Rome collapsed that grew. That's the point of this book is. All this stuff that you think of as European, knights and castles and basilicas and all that, is being built under the under Roman law. Follow me? So she runs on, I saw it earlier today. Where's her, I know I'm going to take a little bit of time. I can't believe like how slow the Wi-Fi is. It's unbelievable. But she's running on like feed the kids. She's running on like fix the fucking roads. Like the Democratic Party is now going back where it belongs. I mean, I wish both parties well, by the way, to like the Depression. Let me see if I can find her. Let's get some Afton Bain quotes. So she's a social worker. She went to the University of Texas, Austin. She's been a Democratic operative for 10 years. And I'm telling you right now, these kinds of women, I did a thing 2 years ago when there were the big Gaza riots. And I put them on Substack. I think they're open to everybody, or they're for all the subscribers. I took like my top 50 TikToks and put on there. But I said when that was happening, I don't give a shit what Biden or Trump do. These young women are going to take over, okay? And all the fucking Mitch McConnells and white boys running around trying to hold the private equity money together, it's not going to fucking work. It's not going to happen over 6 months. It's going to happen over the next 30 years. That whole class of private equity, venture capital, asset managers who do nothing, people that own these enormous blocks of real estate, they're all going to go away, people. There's no precedent in history for people being able to say, oh yeah, fuck you, you're not getting 19% of Medicaid. Your hospital is going to go out of business. We're going to roll up your hospitals into private equity. That's already happened. All the dentists and all the doctors you go to. So what's going on now, like the Roman Empire, is you just have the oligarchs just trying to feed upon anything that's left. Dentists. There's a guy on TikTok, I'm sure you've seen him, with this ridiculous face, and he has a kid named Tarantino or something. He spoofs on a private equity guy. It's spectacular. The white male Republican worldview of like Trump and private equity and Chamath Palihapitiya and his SPACs. Let me tell you what a SPAC is. Here's what a SPAC is. Hey, invest in my thing. Is there anything in the thing? No. Just put your money in it, and I might drop some of my startups that I'm funding, which I don't know what the fuck to do with because I can't take them public. So just give me all your money in this here SPAC, and then I'll put my assets in it. And then the SPAC starts to go up and down with value, even with nothing in it. And then Chamath Palihapitiya sells the SPAC and makes billions of dollars for nothing. And this is the kind of capitalism that the white people are trying to defend. It's not going to fucking work. It's going to get Afton Bained. It's going to get crushed by these young people who are just going to point out and go, Donald Trump, tell me again about your $22 trillion in the White House. Now think about this. The CEO, I mean, this is like Constantine with like this 8-ton head, like laying on the, from a statue, it eventually fell over. Like these are just bullshit, gigantomachy, crazy, wacko numbers that don't have anything to do with anything. And Donald Trump doesn't have $22 trillion. Okay? But they need these giant numbers to deal with this big swirlogram of 100 billion that goes from here to there to the other thing, and all it goes through NVIDIA, which now has obsolete chips. No matter what your politics are, I mean, if you're a Republican, I would say to you, it's time to join the Thomas Massey camp. Along those lines, Colonel McGregor made a comment that I was surprised to hear. He said, I think pretty soon Zelensky and his crew will all go to Israel. Now, a lot of people don't understand that statement. It's because once they go there, they can't be extradited back to Ukraine. Everywhere you look, there's an oligarchy that's crumbling in the West, whether it's Tennessee or Ukraine. There's an oligarchy trying to hang on to some fantasy that Tesla's worth 8.5 trillion and these goofball numbers that don't fucking mean anything. Just to remind you, if NVIDIA went down 90%, it would be worth as much as Exxon. If it went down 95%, it would be worth as much as Intel. These rich people, when I say rich people, I don't mean like a couple millionaires in your at the local country club. These billionaires, if you look at most American billionaires that go on NBC and they know everything and they're like, well, the Fed needs to cut rate, all this happy, they don't have anything, people. They have market cap. They don't have anything that's real. They have crazy, crazy, crazy valuations. And I'll just say this quickly and then I'll answer some questions. At some point, they're going to dump all this shit into blockchain and sell it to you as tokenized private equity, tokenized real estate, tokenized venture capital. Whenever you see that happen, you have to ask yourself, if it's so great, why are they selling it? If Tesla was so great, why did it go public? Why didn't the people that own it keep it? The families that control Cargill have no incentives to take Cargill public because it just prints money. These are the things you got to think about. This is why you got to study history when you think about American history. I've been watching a lot of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger videos, and I knew who they are because I was a stockbroker and an investment advisor. But when you really go into the world of Buffett and Munger, you're seeing like what American capitalism is. But when you really go into the world of Buffett and Munger, you're seeing like what American capitalism used to be. It has no relevance today. The world of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger doesn't exist in today's stock market. Just a reminder, NVIDIA has one chip that everybody supposedly wants. Apple makes their own chips. Google makes their own chips. China now makes their own chips. DeepSeek is a Chinese, and Manus is a Chinese thing. They're now the best of breed. Nobody that's in AI that has best of breed is a Chinese, and Manus is a Chinese thing. They're now the best of breed. Nobody that's in AI that has best of breed wants NVIDIA's chips. And it's worth 5,000 billion. It will never make, thanks, I look like Tim Dillon. It will never make 5,000 billion. Never, ever, ever. It won't even make 5,000 billion in revenue, let alone earnings or dividends. The American financial oligarchy is going away. Uh, the American financial oligarchy is going away. Um, this is why we're sitting around late at night reading. I mean, again, I want to go back to this football thing. Like, just look at the the disgrace of this thing. The fucking coach leaves right before the playoffs. Says, "Well, I still want to coach the games," and the AD is like, "Fuck you, go to fucking LSU and take your guys with you." Like, there's, and the AD is like, "Fuck you, go to fucking LSU and take your guys with you." Like, there's nothing that matters. Nothing means anything other than money, and it's going to fall apart just like this shit. It's what's your Roman Empire? To include, someday we won't be able to defend the country. Mm-hmm. I heard this morning that ICE is starting to recruit bounty hunters. They're just going to pay random thugs to run around. Like, what are they going to do? Scalp people? Just roaming around with masks on and just catching Hispanic people. It sounds like the fucking end of the Roman Empire. Exactly like it. And then what's going to come on the other side of that? Cartels, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have two groups of masked men that nobody knows who the fuck they are, running around chasing each other through central Los Angeles, capturing people and doing who knows what to them. This is what all you white people voted for with the Republican Party. Like just this book says, the barbarians didn't destroy Rome, the Romans destroyed Rome. It wasn't the Muslims who destroyed America. It wasn't even the cartels. It was the white people who voted for Trump. It was the patriots who are destroying America. I don't say that with any like vindictiveness or anything. It's like historically ironic. So, Afton Bane is what's coming, people. In America, you have to understand that the Romans had absolute fucking disdain for Christians. They hated Christians. They burnt them, fed them to the lions, tied them, painted them with tar, and set them on fire. Like, they fucking hate, just like Americans talk about this thing called socialism. Socialism is anybody who wants to take care of it. It's not like, nobody's talking about like taking over the economy with like some sort of neo-Marxist thing. They're just saying like, can like the kids get their milk money? And the fucking wealthy Republican white male 62-year-old oligarch sitting in the country. I know I'm offending some of you. That's why we're on here. And they just hate this. Like, Zohan Mondami wants free buses, which cost nothing, right? 125 years ago, people would be like, what do you mean you're against free busing? We got to take the workers to the steel mill. We're real bad, people. Here's the book, Through the Eye of a Needle, Peter Brown. Rich assholes in country clubs are destroying America the exact same way that Roman oligarchs destroyed the Roman Empire. So I am going to do like a little bit of a Q&A here because some of you popped on here and you have like, who is this asshole? Like, so the first section of that chapter is already on Substack. I think it's free. Here I am trying to be like a influencer and I give everything away for free. Okay. U.S. oligarchy versus Roman. Comment your thoughts. Yeah, I already started that. Oh, I think that's AI telling me to do that. Huh. Yeah, I think yeah, that's the TikTok AI suggesting me what to say. I know the Wi-Fi's bad. James, please sign my hawk to a coin so I can retire. I don't know what that means. Hold on a minute. Who's your favorite Roman Empire? You know, I read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations when I was in college, and I'm really, it's really interesting that that's become so popular. And the Gladiator movie helped and so forth. Excuse me. I had that sweater since I was 12. Um, yeah, so Hoodlum there, talk about the AI bubble. This has gotten a good bit of press, but think of it this way, not like I can prove to you that there's fraud. I can't prove to you anything, right? If, you know, Ford Motor Company wants to give money to Goodyear or Goodyear give money to Ford to buy Goodyear tires, and there's nobody to really stop them. However, as a guy who was trained in a bank, when you see this kind of finance, that you don't have to prove that it's fraud. If you just don't understand it, that's good enough. In other words, that's how they really figured out Enron. People were like, we just don't understand what you do. Well, we're a trade in energy. It's unbelievable. We looked at it very strongly. There's all this trading, and we're controlling the energy world. Like it's a lot like AI. It's a lot like talking about AI. You know, it's like what's his name, Sam Altman. I don't even know why anybody would try to compete with us. OpenAI is getting crushed by everybody, and the guy just walks around and just says, "Yeah, we're very closely to like touching the face of God, surpassing all human knowledge and intelligence." I don't know how anybody in America takes these fucking people seriously. I don't understand it. That's why I read weird books at night. Okay. So rich oligarchs will run to their bunkers in New Zealand and Hawaii. Here's my point there, Zazer, for I'm telling you that the oligarchs don't even have the wealth that they think they have. In other words, we don't know what wealth is anymore. And this is what's coming across in this book. You have these super wealthy people that like live in Gaul, like southern France, right? And they think that they have these plantations, call them plantations, like in other parts of the empire. And then suddenly, for some reason, there's some invasion or something, that connection is gone. That's what's going to happen to the oligarchs here. They're going to wake up one day, and what's going to happen, it's not here yet, but it's coming. Mamdani is going to put price controls in. Then what's going to happen is there's going to be some mortgages against the buildings in Brooklyn that go tits up. And then the banks or the private equity funds or the pensions that have those mortgages are going to go upside down. And then Mamdani's going to stand there, and people like him is going to go, why are we letting these people run the housing market? If it's all going to be taken over by the government, why doesn't the government just do it? See what's coming here? It's not like socialism, like incubated by like the woke. It's the oligarchs are going to blow themselves up. And then people are going to look at Chamat Palahapitiya, and David Sachs, and Andreessen, and they're going to go, let me get this right. So you bought TikTok with the second biggest contributor to the IDF, and was any of your shit involved in October 7th? What do you mean? Was any of your software involved? Were you involved in any censorship regarding October 7th? In other words, when the Afton Bains come in and they start to push back, and they go, tell us, Mr. Karp, because the Democrats will take over Congress, They will impeach Donald Trump. They will most likely indict Donald Trump. I think they will impeach Kash Patel and Bondi. See where I'm going with this? They'll just start going through this thing. Well, they just march from one to the other. And eventually they'll go, Alex Karp, we need you to come talk to us in Congress about lavender. What is lavender, Mr. Karp? Well, it's a software system that engages the kill chain. Was that used in Gaza? See where I'm going with this? And the market cap of Palantir goes poof! The market cap of Palantir, if that happens, goes down 99%. Feeling me? All it takes is about 20 AOCs, 20 Afton Baines to show up on television, and it's over. It's fucking over. They're the Visigoths. They're the barbarians at the gate. They show up, and they're not going to back down. Afton Bain she makes no money. She gets no money. She knocks on fucking doors by herself. She's been a Democratic operative for 10 years. Do you think like some fat Republican oligarch people are going to like go knock on doors? It's coming, folks. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just, when the Epstein shit all came out, I was just like, told you. I told you what happened in Butler. I told you who Trump is. I don't like Kamala Harris either. If if you understand this stuff, when it happens, you won't be so rattled by it. So you might as well get ready for what's real now. So you don't crash out. I know it's glitching. I know. I don't know what the fuck to do. It's just, literally the Wi-Fi box is right behind my head. I guess it's really been terrible glitching. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was this bad. Bad legs, sorry. What the fuck? If AI is so good, why doesn't use AI to design a better chip than NVIDIA? That's a good question. Actually, the barriers to entry, the moat around chip production is pretty high. The NVIDIA chips were made for gaming. They're like, it's like sort of like trying to drive a sports car with an engine from a tractor trailer. That's what NVIDIA chips are. They're not really well suited for thinking. The ones that Google makes are. And the Genius, and I know something about this because this is my son's business profession. The Google chips are put together not with wires, but with optics. So they use way less energy. I'm telling you, NVIDIA is a really, really, really dangerous situation right now. What do you do in the Federal Reserve? There's an asset worth $5 trillion that has nothing? What do you do about that? You can't just cut interest rates. What are you going to do, print money or something? Are you going to have the Fed buy NVIDIA and take it private or something? I don't know what the fuck they're going to do. I really don't. What are they going to do about Tesla? Tesla's a joke. It's real bad, people. My theme tonight is these oligarchs, they look like they have all this money, the Miriam Adelsons and the fucking Barry Sternlichs and all these people. They're done. They're done. I mean, the good news is they're done. The bad news is they're done. What comes next? I'll tell you what comes next is ICE is going to hire bounty hunters, and they're going to peruse the internet, and they're going to go after people like me. That's what's coming. They're already hinting at it. They're going to like pick people up off the fucking street and throw them in vans for their content on the internet. It's starting to come out right now. You didn't really think that they were just going to pick up Venezuelans, did you? Mm-mm. Let me spin through some more questions and answers. I'm sort of curious to what's on people's minds right now, so I felt like sitting here and going through the Q&A. Yeah, the thing about yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. AI. TikTok AI is telling me to quote, AI's impact on society. Comment on AI's future. That's a prompt from AI. So let's have some fun with that. So there's really two kinds of AI. There's centralized AI, like that one. That is probably, I don't know who TikTok uses. It's probably OpenAI. Super intelligent AI is a handle for someone on TikTok. He's the best guy I know talking about this stuff. He says that all AI is controlled by the Department of Homeland Security, and that it's all one big AI. Okay? However, if you go to Substack, I'm going to be talking more about this between now and the end of the year. You will slowly get off of big tech. You won't even know it, why you're doing it. Facebook is done. Nobody likes Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg is such a dick. Nobody even wants to look at him, hear him, see him. Facebook sucks. Instagram sucks. They're going to go away. NVIDIA and that whole thing of this, we're going to turn all of West Texas into a server farm. Do you know how stupid this is? I mean, you understand what a server, these giant large language models are. These are just acres and acres and acres of computers. It's just more compute. There's not like some magical thing going on. It's just like industrialized computation, like churning through the internet. Like it's not even as clever as it sounds. What is clever? As I like to say, go get your 27-year-old an Apple M5 laptop and download a small language model. Download like Manus onto it. Dude, I just started to use Manus, the new 1.5. It's badass. And I don't even really understand it that much, but I just started to use it already. Here it is. I'm not logged in. I'm paying $20 a month, and it's so much firepower. Manus AI is an agent. Okay, we have a relationship with a company called Agent Hub that makes like customized agents. Okay, AI, large language model thing, it's over. It's already over. It's moving into agentic AI, small language models, localized things, like literally AI models that aren't even connected to the internet. And this is why I'm reading this book. Rome at Home, the thing on Substack, is about how Rome became little Romes. Get it? Decentralization. The big Rome turned into a whole bunch of small Romes. The big OpenAI thing is going to turn into like an OpenAI on your desk. You don't need Sam Altman. He's an asshole. He is an asshole. You're not going to, hey, let's do this. Let's put this on. Yep. Yeah, here's this. It's on. I've been talking about it on Substack. It'll take it just a second to pop up, but not long. So I get on my Manus IM. I've been on it since it first hit in the United States. Okay? I said, make me, let's see if it has the time. Yeah, stay with me. I mean, if you want to learn something about AI, just sit still because I'm about to mansplain it to you. So I get on this new Manus 1.5 thing. Let's see if it has the time. So I asked it, here's the exact prompt. I'll read it to you. Generate. Don't go away. Okay, incorporate this logo. So while you're waiting for me to scroll through it, I asked it to build this. Distribute ERC20 tokens, that's the basic Ethereum token, to my Substack subscribers. Took it 28 minutes. Now, it's not just a pretty picture. Look. Look. It's the code. It's the code to go build an app. Less than half an hour. $20 a month. Look. I know you can't see it. It doesn't like it. In half an hour, it built an app to go to aragon.org, create tokens, make a connection to wallets, and make a connection to my Substack followers and start passing out tokens in 28 minutes for $20 a month. Has nothing to do with OpenAI. Manus is like a pre-built agent. It doesn't necessarily go to one large language model or another. It may do some of it itself. And right now, I just heard somebody this morning. I could probably find. Here, I'll show you the guy I started to follow. This is this guy. His handle is at Chocolate Milk Cult Leader. I'm not making it up. At Chocolate Milk Cult Leader. DEVANSH. I saw him like 3 hours ago. It's some of the best shit about AI I've ever heard.
So first, the big one, Gemini 3 Pro, that is out, boys. Personally, am not super impressed by Gemini 3. It seems good, but not phenomenal. I don't know if you guys saw the message on the group chat, but it seems like the base model is pretty good, but it's gotten much, much worse at following instructions. So my big thing with GPT was that it was a very good model for agentic orchestration, because you could just dump a whole bunch of instructions and say, hey, use these tools this way, use these tools this way, do this, do that, and GPT was stable. It would, with the same instructions, call the same things over and over again and just make your life really easy. And that was why I used GPT. It wasn't intelligent, it wasn't good, but it was just reliable. But the instruction following is completely fallen off a cliff. It is so bad, oh my God. And there you've just invalidated your entire... Like, I don't care about GPT as the API anymore when you're basically saying, hey, we're no longer good with instruction following. So that would be my higher level analysis of GPT. And this coming out. Anthropic is lying about they're stopping this Chinese state attack. There is, I am. There's a thing I'm willing to bet on. They're making the story up the way they kind of funded protesters to make it seem like people were scared about X risk, and they've done a lot of other sketchy shit. This is not different to that in terms of, hey, like, they are trying to really, really push this narrative about the dangers of AI, safety of AI. Anthropic is really shaken by the emergence of open source models, and they were shaken terribly by DeepSeek. So Dario had written letters about how we need export controls and protect us, and he got the export controls, and turns out they still can't compete. Because turns out when you have people doing actual research, you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. You don't just need to scale up with the best chips. And Dario's attempt is at basically stalling this out, because right now, if you look at the data, Manus AI is considered by most people I know to be the number one agentic tool. It's not Cloud Code, it's not anything else, it's Manus. I don't personally use it that much, but you can't really argue with data. You have fucking, what else? What was the data point? Yeah. Apparently, a lot of the open source models currently in deployment, when you look at the data, are Chinese models. And all of those has our friend Dario shaking up a little bit. So this whole narrative about how him and Anthropic were bravely able to stop the cyber attack is just that. It's a narrative. They're spinning a story to make them sound better, so that they can embed into the governments. They can do a bunch of other stuff, and they didn't do this. But it is a lie. Anthropic, sue me if you want, but you're not going to.
You understand the implications of this, right? That the Chinese are building open source models. We're not. Okay, about a year ago, I think it's on Substack, I did a piece called, the algorithm won't like this, I did a piece called Mandarinism, Chinese, versus Zionism. And people were like, what? What are you talking about? This is the thing. How is it that the Chinese are making open source things? Like DeepSeek is the only peer-reviewed, like, that's the Western science, right? Peer review. Hey, I have an idea. Let's take ivermectin for COVID, right? And you have to publish a paper and do research, and then you have to put it in a journal, and everybody else gets to do research on it and beat up your idea. That's peer review, right? Chinese are doing peer review. It's the Western system. They're doing it. We're not. All the Western AIs are centralized black boxes that nobody understands. Why? Because they're Zionists. They're centralized. They're trying to control everything. And this goes on to my theme tonight. We don't fucking have anything, people. America doesn't have anything. We have soybeans and Billie Eilish, but like they have a $60 trillion stock market based on nothing. If BYD was allowed to bring automobiles here, the whole automobile industry would instantly vaporize. Steel. If we didn't have tariffs and shit and controls on what comes into this country other than like cheap Palantir hats and stuff, like all of our industry would be wiped out. You understand that Porsche, Audi, VW is bankrupt. It's not headline news yet. It's probably never going to be. It's going to China. Porsche is going to China. Just give me 6 months on that. They can't compete in Germany. Victoria Nuland cut off the natural gas. They blew up the pipeline. Blah, blah, blah. You can't run a fucking industrial economy with energy, LP, like liquid propane, like from the United States, like 5 times as much as Russian gas. Europe's done, people. It's real bad. It's real bad. By the way, he is Devansh. Devansh. That's actually a cool name. Devansh. But he posted that today. I saw it this morning. I was like, I started to follow him. I haven't watched most of his stuff, but that's the future of AI, people. It's going to be open source. It's going to be relatively inexpensive or free. 97% of what you do, you're going to be able to do from a small computer locally. You're not even going to need, we're not going to be running the world off of 1,200 acre server farms in West Texas. That's just not the future. That is so Roman Empire. I don't need, like these big giant projects. We're going to, 22 trillions coming in. We're building jet. It's true. We are building natural gas fired power plants. And that's why they're going to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Texas and here in Western PA. They're going to use all of our surplus energy to run these giant fucking large language models. It's a complete Roman Empire disaster, Nero freak show. There's no math. The math on all this stuff doesn't matter. How about this? How about this company here for 125 times sales, not earnings, sales? I bought the hat. So. The hat's ironic, folks. Can we go to some remote island in Caribbean to escape AI? I think the way you'll escape AI is you'll eventually download it on a really powerful iPad or laptop. And you'll have your own local AI. So you won't be afraid of these big, giant systems. You'll just be like, I don't need them. I don't need Gemini AI. I have my own. The whole AI is a bubble thing. Yeah, how about Roblox from 22 to 150? I don't know why my voice is going. This isn't a bubble. This is something else. Like, there was a .com bubble, which means there was a whole bunch of pets.com that were never had any revenue and never really were going to have revenue immediately. So that was a bubble. Then there was tens of billions, probably a couple $100 billion of overbuilding of fiber optic cable like Global Crossings. And that also had a lot of debt. That's not what's going on here. Then, of course, there was the great financial crisis. What we're dealing with here is much more like the Depression. In other words, it's going to take out, it's not just a correction in valuations. In other words, if the stock market woke up tomorrow and it decided, maybe these prices have to start to reflect the underlying fundamentals and shit like that, it would wipe out half of all the pensions. This is systemic. Like, this could almost take out the U.S. government. Right? And if you watch those movies, I just watched one about 2 weeks ago. What was it called? Margin Call. And there's this moment where they go like, oh my God, this could like take out the whole Western banking system. And yeah, but see, the whole Western banking system isn't the government. Okay? So what Bernanke did was he took the banking problem and merged it with the government. Okay? So now there's no fucking way out, people. There's no way to just let it burn, right? I always reference Mark Faber and Jim Rogers were like, okay, so there's $500 billion worth of bad debt. Just let it go to zero. Like, Everybody from Lehman will go back to Long Island and get drunk for the weekend and then pick up the phone and they'll start private equity firms and they'll start doing mortgages again and they'll start doing finance again. They'll be okay. That's how it works. No, we can't do that. Because what it did is it rattled the concept, the false narrative in the banking system that leverage is good for us. Leverage is not good for us. So now they can't let the religion, it's like a Roman Empire thing. They can't let the religion of the Fed and leverage and debt and growth. Growth is debt. Okay? So in 2008 the economy was about a little less than 15 trillion. Now it's a little bit over 30 trillion. The real economy didn't double since 2008. Right? There's not like twice as much of everything, right? It's just the debt. The numbers just create this false growth thing, right? So Ben Bernanke is like the satanic conjurer of trillions and trillions and trillions to make you believe that depressions can just be wiped out by the Federal Reserve. That's who Ben Bernanke is. He's the guy that spent his whole career at Princeton saying the Depression didn't have to happen, and that if Ben Bernanke were alive during the Depression, there wouldn't have been a Depression. These fucking people, their arrogance has no bounds. They're just like these oligarchs in the Roman history books. Okay? Now, you have the President of the United States talking about a fictitious $22 trillion. By the way, that was roughly the backstory. This has some irony to it. Trump running around talking about the $22 trillion that doesn't exist is a lot like the end of the movie where you see Mustache Man talking about moving divisions around to fight the Russians that don't exist. What's it called? Untergang. It's about the end of the World War II. And they're in the bunker, right? And like Mustache Man is like moving these people around that don't exist anymore. These divisions that don't exist anymore. That's what Trump's doing. It's Untergang. We're going under. There's trillions that don't exist anymore. I don't know what the fuck they'll do if like the thing ever goes like this and actually goes down and starts to erase this false AI market cap. There's no assets under fucking NVIDIA doesn't even make its own chips. They're made by TSMC. They were supposed to come here and be made in Indiana by HK Hynix. And they haven't even got that. They haven't even broke ground on that yet. The thing's worth $5 trillion. It's worth NVIDIA's worth half as much as the Chinese stock market. They can't let these things like go back to like to find their. I don't know what they're gonna do. I really I don't know. They may. If you had to say like what happened to the Roman Empire, it was brought under new ownership. As this book is describing, the new ownership was the barbarian kings. They didn't like come in and kill everybody and tear down the walls and tear down all the bridges and poison the wells, and that's not what happened. Let's continue, shall we? I think it'll be nationalized. I think in the end, I think the American economy will be nationalized. I think we'll elect 37 Afton Baines. The Democratic Party all the Zionists will be driven out of the Democratic Party. Okay? They're just all going to go away. It's going to be a litmus test. Gaza will become the litmus test. And then, and to a great extent, a lot of the Republicans will go along with that. And then the banking industry, the chips industry, the Intel has already been nationalized. The government owns like 7% of it. See where I'm going with this? Banks, private equity firms. The private equity firms will start to dump all this shit into tokenization and try to put it in your IRA. And we're building a firm right now that is going to be like, no, people, just because it says crypto tokenization does not mean it has value. And then that'll go kaflooey, and the government will just step in and just start taking over whole industries. Not because it's like the great revolution, viva la revolution. It's because everything will be in complete collapse. It'll be in complete collapse. Like, what do you do with Palantir? Palantir is run by a guy who says that he wants to take that drug that is on our streets that's killing people and lace urine with that drug and spray it onto the people in the parking lots of the brokerage firms who are shorting his stock. That's who the fuck runs Palantir. And this guy's on cable TV, interviewed by people. He's a psychopath. He's a Frankfurt School Bolshevik freak. And everybody's like, yeah, this is good. He publicly says they're going to beat China, Russia, and Iran with AI. He's a goof. He's a charlatan. He's a fraud. The last Roman Empire's name was Augustus Romulus. That would be like naming a president of the United States Abraham Washington or George Lincoln or something like that. You get the joke? These people that have all this market cap and all these billions and appear to be the masters of the universe right now, they're done. It may be 10 months, it may be 10 years, I might be dead. They are done. Just like these people were done. New Romans from old, 430 to 480. Although by the mid-5th century we're looking out on a new west, beyond the Alps, Gaul, and Spain had been broken up into a mosaic of different regions. The res publica still survived, impoverished though it was. Sound familiar? Up into a mosaic of different regions. The res publica still survived, impoverished though it was. Sound familiar? It remained the largest single political unit in Europe. It was shaken in Italy and was still a valid presence in southern Gaul. Geographically, we are in a world that had returned to the days of the Punic Wars of the 3rd century BC. At that time, Italy and the rim of the western Mediterranean had faced Africa, while at their back a vast uncontrolled hinterland stretched behind the coastline to the north and west. Now in the 5th century AD, central controlled hinterland stretched behind the coastline to the north and west. Now in the 5th century AD, central Romanists in the form of the legitimate Roman Empire, the res publica reached up from Italy to hold the Mediterranean and eastern Spain. But the ongoing of central Rome based on the Mediterranean will bring to the north and Rome based on the Mediterranean will bring to the north and west. But great people from up north went down through Spain, jumped the Mediterranean, and came across the desert. Vandal showed exactly what ruthless state power could still do. As far as we can see, the Vandal is not based on tacit between the local Romans and a port, as happened with the Goths in Bordeaux and Toulouse. Major Roman landowners in proconsular Africa and Byzantica were abruptly dispossessed so as to leave around the hinterland of Carthage that was occupied by Vandal warriors alone. Worse than that, the Vandals did not hide the fact that they were, I'm not going to say it on here, they were a sect of Christianity that didn't believe in the divinity of Christ, and not Catholic Christians. By the way, the Roman Catholics and Orthodox are meeting right now in Nicaea, which was originally 1,700 years ago, to deal with this very problem. Tonight they're meeting. Within a decade, Catholic bishops were exiled as heretics. The Vandals even used the former anti-Donatus laws that had imposed exile on Donatus bishops after 411. You have to be deep in your theology to understand this, but let's all calm down. Vandal rulers applied these laws unchanged to the Catholic clergy. By a strange and not wholly undeserved irony of fate, many of the friends of Augustine ended their lives as exiles in Italy. They had been driven from their cities by the same laws against heresy that had petitioned 30 years before in order to drive out their rivals. So it was a theological dispute between the barbarians. A theological dispute between the barbarians. Despite decades of preaching by Augustine and his cause, they had not become massively Catholic cities. Their town councilors now found themselves in a dilemma. They were forced by a strong vandal state of, again, I can't use the word because it sounds like something else, and if you know your theology, you know what I'm talking about. To choose between loyalty to their Catholic bishops and clergy as Catholic believers and the loss of their lay privileges, or conformity to the new regime and the retention of their status as hometowns. Conformity to the new Vandal rule, in effect, enabled them to continue to be loyal to the title of res publica on their own city. This was what had always mattered most for them. Not surprisingly, they chose the city over the altar. They did not rally to support the Catholic Church, nor did they become zealous, these other things. Accustomed to polite conformity by the suppression of this other group, only a generation earlier, the lay elites kept a low profile. They left the two groups of clergy to fight it out between themselves while they governed their little cities as they had always done. So the barbarians just wanted to be in control. They didn't really want to get involved in deep theological problems. The failure of the African elites to stand up for the Catholic Church deserves to be stressed. It showed how precarious the position of the Church still was in many regions. Despite a vocal Christian literature that celebrated the merging of church and city in Gaul and Spain, this alliance may have come more slowly than we think, and certainly more slowly than the bishops and the clergy wished. If you're getting bored by this, let me explain something to you. The Frankish king Clovis became a Catholic, and that created the state of France, which we still know today. See what's going on here? Like, the way you really take over a region and control it and settle the matters for all time is you become a Roman Catholic. And that's what the Middle Ages are. So this is like the lead up to the Middle Ages. You feeling me? Yet the paradox of the Vandal kingdom is precisely that after these draconian measures, what remained of the Roman society of Carthage in eastern Africa, the old provinces of blah, 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 settled down to thrive with indecent vigor. Large palaces appeared in the city. Roman officials staffed the Vandal administration. Roman ship owners helped man the Vandal war fleets. This was probably more profitable to them than it had been the annual efforts to stir into action the great dinosaur of the Roman fleet that had once sailed from Carthage to Rome. It's like a big merger. Not all subjects of the Vandals sailed the sea as pirates. Freed from the levies connected with the Romans, African ceramics and African wines flooded into the market throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The ancient link across the southern Mediterranean between Africa and the Levant, which had characterized Punic Carthage, was revived in the 5th century. Our word, vandalism, was derived from the Vandals, who came to enjoy an odious reputation in later ages. Yet they had not brought destruction to Africa. Rather, through their own commercial outreach, the Vandals of Carthage presided over something of an Indian summer for the ancient Phoenician economy. The Phoenicians and the people of Carthage were known as the great traders of the time. Latin poets came to frequent the Vandal court. They praised the Vandal ruler as the Sun King. They inscribed elegant verses on their still functioning suburban bathhouses. In the Old World lived on anywhere in the West, as well as the gray zones in Britain, Gaul, and Spain, where the emperor's writ no longer worked. would have been known in southern Gaul. They form a backdrop to one of the most remarkable phenomena of this period, that is, the rallying of loyalty to the legitimate empire, usually spoken of as the Respublica, in these areas where imperial rule had continued. An influential segment of Gallic upper class society rejected local forms of local Romanness. They opted again for central Romanness, represented by the surviving empire, depleted though the empire had become. Just another aside. The Roman Empire and the Protestant Reformation, it's almost the same line. All the people that lived in the Roman Empire stayed in the control of the Roman Catholic Church, and all the people on the other side became Lutherans. Just saying. It is important to note this phenomenon. We have spent much of this chapter examining the way in which the whole regions of Gaul and Spain opted slowly but surely for forms of regional government that tacitly excluded the empire. But this was almost always covert process, a somewhat shameful open secret. It can only be reconstructed with difficulty as it left little trace in Roman sources. Only very few writers referred to the awkward fact that there were now Romans out there who prayed never again to become subjects of the Roman state. What we more usually hear in the sources of this time is the voice of the vocal faction committed to the empire, to the structures and attitudes of the Roman Empire, as it had been inherited from the 4th century and as it would survive, if only outside Italy, in a series of increasingly embattled enclaves until the late 470s. We are dealing with, in effect, with the emergence of a new style of Roman patriotism. In the 4th century, the Roman Empire had been seen as a universal empire. It had no, remember, it's Christian at this time. It had no challengers other than barbarians outside its frontiers. It was a true orbis terrarium, a civilized world as vast and seemingly immovable as the universe itself. By the mid-5th century in the West, the universal empire survived in Gaul and Spain only as a constellation of enclaves. Central Romanness was no longer a given, it had become an option. But it was an option for which many writers voted with their pens. Confronted by the widening pockets of local Romanness, these enclaves were breeding grounds for a distinct kind of hyper-Romanness. If anything, this hyper-Romanity increased in intensity as the imperial enclaves themselves shrunk over the decades. Nothing shows this more clearly than the fierce intransience with which the upholders of the surviving imperial order viewed their world than their reaction to one of the most mysterious phenomena of the age, the Bacchaudae. On the subject of the Bacchaudae, learned fantasies, largely but no means exclusively of the Marxist persuasion, have flourished. We still do not know who they were. Some have treated them as a peasant jacquerie. Others have seen them as local landowners who resorted to violent means to defend their region in a world bereft of imperial protection. We do not even know whether they were a person or a happening, nor do we know whether it was an urban event or an exclusively rural movement, as most scholars have tended to assume. But we do know one thing. We know that the Bacchaudae, I'm going to say it, Bacchaudae, Bacaudae, I've never heard this before, were perceived by others. 2 chroniclers are the only sources who make frequent mention of their activities at the time. These activities are recorded in Gaul and in Spain. Both authors referred to the suppression with undisguised satisfaction. In Spain, a general broke their insolence. In Outer Gaul, a leader called Tabato led the region to secede from membership of the Roman order. He caused the slaves of almost all Gaul to conspire in revolution. 2 years later, the commotion was suppressed. With much slaughter, this event was recorded with evident satisfaction by the Chronicle of 452. It sounds like that movie, The Free State of Jones, where in the middle of this crazy civil war, like a bunch of soldiers and locals and everything just say, fuck you, we're not answering to anybody, we're our own people, we're in the free state of Jones. Nowhere did the author pretend that the Bacalae were barbarians, they had been Romans. For almost the first time in the history of the Roman Empire, Roman armies took the field not against barbarians or the armies of rival emperor, but against Roman subjects. This is weird, folks. This is what's happening in America. This is what ICE is. ICE is an attack on the American people. Altogether forced by the defensive, but by so much unwelcome and alternative ways of being Roman, which now ranged from abandoned Britain through the ill-defined zones of unrest in Gaul and Spain to the pirate capital of Carthage, the res publica in the last decades was by no means dead, but it was not a pretty thing. Indeed, the res publica had become in many ways an ancient regime, derived from the ambitious state of the 4th century. The 5th century empire, as it was impinged on Gaul, lacked the cohesion between its top and bottom levels that had made the empire of Valentinian formidable but flexible. What had happened in the crisis of the 3rd century reoccurred in 5th century Gaul. A split developed between the inner circles of government and the governing classes at large. Again, something like this is happening in the United States. Ruthless generals sent from Italy allied with the Gallic families who had already clambered onto the imperial bandwagons in the days of Valentinian and Theodosius. These families expected to retain a monopoly of high offices in Gaul. They were considerably less open than before to the governing classes as a whole, that is, to persons recruited from the lesser nobility of the cities. They did not promote them. They did not listen to their views. The control exercised by the privileged families over the higher levels of the administration created, quote, a situation in which politics had become the preserve of the already powerful. As a result, the social mobility that had energized the imperial administration in the 4th century dried up. To opt for the res publica in the empire in the later half of the 5th century was not to opt for the Roman Empire as it had been in the days of Constantine, Valentinian, and Theodosius. It was to support a more than usually proud and top-heavy system, deeply wedded to a sense of its own excellence, like the fucking American oligarchy. It is against this background that we can best appreciate the career and writings of Sidonius Apollinarius. Born in Lyon, Sidonius spent most of his life in the imperial enclaves of the Rhone Valley. He also went to Italy twice. It is part of the literary genius that he ensured that his Rome, the Rome of the hyper-Roman, who viewed the world through narrow slits, had become, to a large extent, from Rome. For Sidonius presented what remained of the empire as a model society that was worthy of unquestioning loyalty. To be loyal to Rome was to be loyal to the civilization itself. As a result, this is basically like our Mark Levin. As a result, it is Sidonius' Rome that we see pass majestically and tragically into the imagined twilight of the barbarian age. Yet as we read his letters and poems, we can glimpse the many alternative forms of being Roman that had already pressed in around him. It was this alternative, more provincial form of Romanness that would win out in the end of his life. We have 3 pages. Many local Romans saw no great advantage in being subjects of the emperors. Their relatives and peers were already making good careers at the Gothic court. In 478, Sidonius wrote to one such Roman, who were already making good careers at the Gothic court. In 478, Sidonius wrote to one such Roman, Nematius, who was not a servant of the res publica. He was serving Uric, an admiral of the Gothic Atlantic fleet stationed at Bordeaux, a local figure with a tinge of nobility. Nematius did not treasure family memories of high office in the empire that dated from the age of gold, because he's a new German. Indeed, because he's a new German. Indeed, he did not need the res publica to make him feel great, or even to make him feel Roman. It was enough for a man of energy such as him to follow, quote, the standards of the church that had formed around barbarian courts. They were not interested in building villas. They were not rich enough to build the shimmering new basilicas that had begun to decorate the cities of Gaul, but they did know how to put their money into relatively cheap demonstrations of Catholic piety. Here's where it gets good. Above all, as good Catholics, they knew a saint when they saw one. Such a person was Count Victorus. He was Uric's, some Gothic guy, first military commander in Clermont after the city had been handed over to the Goths. Like Nematius, he had risen as a military leader in Gothic service. When a holy hermit was on his deathbed, Victorious bent over the dying man. He bent over his office low as on his own knees. He was careful to weep. He paid for the cost of the funeral, writing in 477, the res publica had vanished in the west. Sidonius was pleased to observe such piety in the new governor of Clermont. Victorious was also careful to leave his mark on the surrounding countryside. He set up a row of columns at the popular rural shrine of St. Julian. He brought relics of St. Lawrence to a church he built on his estate. It is more than likely that Victorious considered that these acts of devotion were done for the atonement of his sins. There were many who thought that such atonement was needed. Writing a century later, Gregory of Tours remembered the pious donations with approval. But he added a further anecdote. Victorious arrested the senator Eucharius, a former illustrious man of the days of the old empire. The old oligarchs are all passing into the night of history. One night he ordered him to be dragged from the prison in which he had been placed, and having tied him next to an ancient wall, he ordered his very wall to be pulled down on top of him. It was a lesson in post-imperial politics, Roman Gothic style. Sidonius died between 480 and 490 after the empire had vanished from the west. On his sarcophagus he made no mention of his bishopric. His offices in the res publica and his literary activities were what mattered for him. Nor did he date his death by the reign of any local king. Instead, he dated his death by the reign of the Eastern Emperor Zeno, which was in Constantinople. Sidonius considered Zeno, as Emperor of Constantinople, to be the sole surviving head of the legitimate Roman Empire. Sidonius's descendants, by contrast, took the new politics of local Romanists like ducks to water. His son Apollinarius led out the militia of Clermont to fight for the Goths against the Franks in the famous battle of I'm going to say Voulay. It's not Voulay, but just go with it. His grandson Arcadius played an important and sinister role at the Frankish court. He helped the son of Clovis, who I talked about a second ago, get rid of the young nephews who might claim the throne. It was Arcadius who appeared before the boy's grandmother carrying a sword and a pair of scissors. He gave her the choice of having them tonsured as clergymen or killed. Only one opted to be tonsured. I think that means to have your cut out. This happened in the 520s. A lot can happen in 100 years. Only a century before, in the 420s, Augustine was still alive, petitioning the imperial court above the slave trade in Africa. The res publica had only just begun to feel the first tremors that preceded its collapse in Gaul, Spain, and Africa. Last paragraph, and then we'll go to bed. It is important for us to understand the texture of the 5th century West as a whole before we deal in detail with the manner in which we have described. But it is important for us to have this panorama in mind for another reason. Not only did the general crisis overcome the Western Empire in the 5th century, but the crisis itself was viewed and judged by a remarkable society of Christian authors who wrote in the imperial enclaves of Provence and in the southern valley of the Rhone. These writers are a listening station for us. It is through them that we can still hear the voices of a world in crisis. Their writings touched in vivid and pertinent ways on every aspect of the relation between Christianity and society. So now let us turn first to the saints, to the Christian intellectuals of Marseille, and to the monk bishops of the monastery of Lerins, and then to the most remarkable personality to emerge from this circle, Salvian, the priest of Marseille. Okay, so we're not going to get into that. That's like all the theological stuff that nobody really cares about anymore. But there you have it, folks. The Roman oligarchy was replaced by a sort of a confederation of Romans who were sick of just play the Trump administration coming in. Stephen Miller goes on cable TV. We can do whatever the fuck we want. Hegseth is having the Navy SEALs unalive people in the water. These people fucking think that they are completely untouchable. They're going to send ICE agents around. The American populace is just going to be paralyzed in fear because of all this. And I have one sentence for y'all. America ain't fucking Palestine. Have a nice night.